Hey folks, in today's video, we'll be making some models from Tennessee Pass models, I guess. Um, yeah, let's get into this. So as this is a resin printed model, you always have to wash these before you actually start doing anything to them, just because there's often a lot of residue. For this, I'm just using warm soapy water in a little jar here and a stiff brush. I'm just going to say right now, I'm only making the Dodge Power Wagon in this video, and as well as the models from this guy, Tennessee Pass models, are exceptional. You can find them on eBay, and they are anywhere from maybe around, at the highest, $35 to the lowest I saw around $5. And these models are incredible, both in HO and N scale. I can't recommend them enough. The next step is pretty much to free it from its weird little prison here. That's just the leftover casting. Yeah, it's pretty simple, and if you use hot water, these should come out freer and easier. My water was barely even warm, so just pry them out and be careful and use some cutters. There are actually mirrors attached to this truck, and I was very careful not to cut them off. If you have poor eyesight, you should really get a magnifying glass and look at some of the details on this. In fact, most of the video was shot in 2x zoom, because this thing is just so tiny. I decided to remove the tailgate on this model just to make it look a little different, as well as it just might, I don't know, it seemed appropriate considering a truck of this age. Before I proceed any further with this, I just want to point out how tiny this is and how much detail there is in this. It's actually insane, to be honest. I never knew you could make models this small, let alone this detailed. I just want to point that out because this person, whoever made this model, is very skilled at what they do. All right, now I'll let you guys get back to your regularly scheduled programming. This project, I'm actually trying to recreate one image I saw on Pinterest rather faithfully. I'm also pretty sure it lost its tailgate, which would make sense because the truck is actually some type of tow truck. These Dodge Power Wagons, they actually came factory with a large winch in the front, which you can actually see here. Pretty much it can only work forwards because, you know, it's in the front of the truck. So pretty much everything built on top of this is a mechanism to reverse it, and so it could tow something behind it. Now, the story behind this truck is it's supposed to be the work truck of a local logging company. It's not necessarily road legal. It's just something to do work in the woods and pull trucks out when it needs to and pull logs when it's not doing that. And when it's not doing that, it's just going to be sitting idle for possibly months at a time, most likely during the winter. So this truck will not be cared for, and it will be really just a terrible old truck that just keeps working. Now, my running story with that is the company actually had bought around 10 of these back in the day, and this is the last one left. And this one would probably last into the mid-70s. Meanwhile, all the others were scrapped or used for parts long ago. Now, I'll point out in the original image, there are two A-frames on the front of the truck. One of them, I know exactly what it is for because I've seen them on old Jeeps, especially military ones. It's pretty much a hard point for towing out a vehicle because this thing's getting stuck in the mud because it's in pretty much Washington State in the middle of the woods. The second one is taller and it's pretty much just I'm pretty sure it's just pretty much a block and pulley for the cable of the winch and guides it backwards. Then there's that track that goes over the hood and the cab, and then there's that headache rack in the back where there's another block and like another pulley that where the cable goes over. Simple mechanism, and it just really redirects the cable, but that's all it is. To make this though was pretty difficult. Um, just you gotta have patience for this. Sometimes I honestly really didn't measure for this. I just kind of made it look right and called it a day. I'm gonna be honest, got very lucky with this project. Next thing I needed to make was the pulley for the back. Pretty much all I used was a piece of solid core wire, and if you cut the insulation right, it'll look just like a pulley. So what I did is I cut a short segment of the wire, no real measurements, just looked about right. Then I cut whatever insulation was on that tiny little segment in half. After I did that, I kind of slid it off the end of the wire just a little bit and cut the end off. So then when I slid it back onto the wire, it would pretty much resemble a pulley because there'd be a tiny little gap in the middle. For this next bit, I'm just going to gloss over it. I made a little tow cable out of some very fine, already like twisted wire. Really, I took all the insulation off of it and twisted it tight. I tried again two ways of making a hook. I ended up going with the brass. It looks a little oversized, but it actually worked unlike the other plastic one. A huge selling point of the Dodge Power Wagon was the fact that it had A, four-wheel drive, B, power takeoff, and C, the fact it had really, really high ground clearance from factory. This is my one complaint with this model, the fact that there's a huge tube in the front. The back, I don't care so much. You don't see that. But in the front, it looks off. So I pretty much just cut it in half, and I was really worried I was going to break it. I almost did. But it did work out. Now, all I did was stick a cut piece of a pin, like a T-pin, and stuck in between as a reinforcement. Additionally, these things had two drive shafts, one to the front, one to the rear. That's four-wheel drive. And because it's an older truck, they're actually kind of lower and they're definitely more exposed. Newer ones, they almost always seem to sit inside the frame rails. These old ones, though, especially ones with high ground clearance, they almost always hang out the bottom. So they're pretty visible. Again, cut a piece, the same T-pin up and made a drive shaft out of it. Now for that front, I guess, towing A-frame, I'll refer to it as, I was going to use brass wire, but it just looked a little off, and I conveniently found a piece of scrap on my bench that was literally just trash. Um, that actually worked better, so I just used that instead. Again, same thing, didn't really measure, just cut two relatively even pieces, glued them onto the front bumper, and it looked right, pretty much. For the paint, I originally went for this brighter green color that I paint my locomotives. Um, it wasn't dark enough in the picture, and I actually happen to have another bottle of dark green paint lying around, so I ended up using that. So I was really actually just trying my best to copy that other one as best I could. Though I will say, I think I actually added like an interesting two-tone shading effect because I decided to paint the whole cab this brighter green. Then when I painted the darker green over it in spots where it was thinner, it did actually show through and looked somewhat like a highlight. So maybe it was kind of one of those happy accidents, I guess. In this little part, I just continue painting. The bed is also a dark green. It in the photo it's almost completely rust colored, which I mean is to be expected. Um, yeah, at this point I also already finished painting the cab, so I'll just speed through this real quick. So here I'm just pointing out that in every photo I've seen, they always seem to have a chrome strip or trim around the windows. Now, another one other complaint I guess I have with this model is the windows seem a little too square. I will say I think that's just a limit of 3D printing at this point, or even resin printing, really, because this is so tiny. Pretty much, I tried my best to make the chrome strip, and actually turned out really great. It highlighted pretty much exactly how I wanted it to, and made the windows seem a little larger and a little more correctly shaped. Because ones in real life are have a few more curves and a couple more angles to them, and this one just seems like a square. So, but this is definitely worthwhile, but also very tedious. To actually make the chrome strip, I just took a single strand out of a multi-strand piece of nickel copper wire, something like that. I don't know, just bent it the right way. I don't know how else to tell you, just the right way. I would never do this again, to be honest. But I'm gonna be honest, the results were so good. Um, yeah, no, it was worth it. All right, and pretty much after this, it was time to install the wheels. I painted these completely black because cheap people paint their steel rims black. So whatever. To actually install them, you do have to drill out the holes. I think this is the same with every resin print model. Just it's hard to estimate because you don't want it to be too loose a fit and you don't want it to be too tight. But in this case, they were a little too small, so I drilled them out. You could honestly do this with an X-Acto knife too. I just had a pin drill. Pretty simple. Again, be careful not to break them. And actually, in hindsight, I did forget to glue those in. I actually scratched the paint up pretty bad while I was doing that. Um, I touched it up. Then I also did all the little details in silver, the window frames, the doorknobs, all that other stuff that's always in chrome, and the radiator cap on the hood, especially, and also the front headlights. I then clear coated it, as you can see here, so it wouldn't scratch off again. And pretty much after that, it was just finishing touches. One of the finishing touches is actually adding this whole cable here. This was by far the biggest pain I had in the whole project. It took forever to get just right and glue down and then curl up in the back of the bed. But otherwise, it was pretty easy. Here begins the weathering. I normally wouldn't show my palette, but in this case I will. Pretty much, I'm making a little tarp for the back. Because in the original photo, pretty much you just see the dog sitting on the guy's truck, and well, I kind of want to recreate that, but I wanted this thing to look like it was moving or getting ready to move, so I want to have the dog lying in the back on a little blanket. Best way to do that is take a piece of tissue paper, make a mix of glue and water, so it's all thinned out. Then pretty much, if you want, add coloring to it. I added orange acrylic paint, and just dragged the piece of tissue through it after I cut it roughly to shape, just roughly square, and then kind of laid it down in the bed. That way, it looked like the owner of the dog just kind of like laid out a blanket just for the dog to lay there until he got back. For the actual weathering itself, pretty much, I always recommend mixing a yellow and a brown together, and it makes this weird like muck color. It looks like just a suspension, and I dab that pretty much everywhere, lower on the truck and inside the bed and everywhere else, especially on the rims. I use darker brown, like a mix of another brown and black, and made that look like rust spots. And yeah, it wasn't too crazy, but I think the results were good. Again, kind of got lucky on this. Maybe it's skill, who knows? But I think it was more luck than anything. Now for the windows, I just use regular old canopy glue. Again, just use a surface tension and kind of like smear around the inside of the windows with a pin. And I actually left the driver's side window undone and did a little triangle window. Don't miss those. Just make it look like it was left open because, as I said, the guy's probably coming back soon, if anything. And also the rear window too. And last but not least, of course, the most important element of this whole thing, the dog, which I stole from one of my other kits. On to the beauty shots, I guess.